Good Thursday morning, everyone. Ohio State's back in the commitment column. This time it's the class of 2024. Commitment number 2, Ian Moore, New Palestine, Indiana, 6'6", 290-pound offensive tackle. He's committed to Ohio State. Austin Ward and myself are going to break that down for you right now. Austin, it's been a while since Ohio State's picked up a commitment. I think the last one was it feels like it was in the year 2019 or so, but it doesn't matter. Today they pick one up. It's a big one. It's an offensive tackle, and there's not really anywhere to go but down from here when you pick up the commitment from the number 1 ranked tackle in the country, Ian Moore.
Well, you have the number 1 ranked quarterback in the country and the number 1 ranked tackle. That seems pretty good, right? I mean, as you say, it can only go down, or you could just get the number 1 ranked player at every single position. Maybe Ohio State should do that.
Well, there has been some scuttlebutt amongst the people that are in this, recruiting world, that they feel like the 2024 class, because of the fact that Dylan Raiola is the Kickstarter of that class, that it may be the class that Ohio State is best positioned to finally unseat the SEC and win a national championship on the recruiting trail. And you can't do it if you don't do that. And the reality is, Ian Moore, the player who's committed on Thursday morning, it's sort of been a slow burn. I put in a future cast on the Rivals Network for him. Basically, the minute after he left Ohio State on September 4th, after the Notre Dame game when he came to visit, just felt like a kid that really saw what he wanted, and the Buckeyes prioritized him early. But you have to have players like him at every position if you want to win a recruiting title. 6'6", 290, as I said in the intro, a player that is raw-ish, but he plays on one of the best offensive lines in the Midwest at New Palestine. His head coach, Kyle Ralph, is the guy that Justin Fry knows very well. That relationship sort of helped get Ohio State in the door. And, it's something where if you identify a position of need early and you identify a player that you really like early, a school like Ohio State doesn't need to waste a whole lot of time in locking him up.
Yeah. For me, when I look at this from the bigger picture perspective, you know much more about the individual player and the timeline, what that's going to look like for him to potentially contribute. I'm thinking about this from Justin Fry's impact, the success that he's had early. I think people certainly the biggest downside with Greg Studrawa's tenure at Ohio State was that he wasn't able to close the deal with a lot of these higher profile targets for Ohio State. And they weren't able to really reload the pipeline at the level that they wanted to. So the fact that Justin Fry has been able to get in year 1 and start doing this. Now, this is not somebody who's obviously going to be able to help Ohio State next year or potentially even in 2 years, but this is an example of the impact that he seems to be having quickly, Justin Fry. And then beyond that, I think you can ask, how does the rest of the staff then continue to build on this momentum? Because on the defensive side of the football, there were people that wanted to wait to see what the first half of the season looked like. So maybe you'll know better than me. This could be the start of something more, not just for 2024, but the 2023 class and other positions.
Yeah, it's funny because actually on the ohiostate.rivals.com message board this morning, on Thursday morning, there was a question asked in one of our threads from one of the subscribers who said, what happened to that big weekend of September 3rd? Where are the commitments going to come? And last week on Talking Stuff with Andrew Ellis, I said, there's a lot of kids who are kind of waiting till the end of their junior season to make a decision in the class of 2024. Ian Moore actually was one of those kids. He told me last week that his intention had been to just get through the end of this season, try to win a state championship in Indiana, and then focus on making a decision. But the other schools he was really interested in, which were Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, 3 teams that are, if you're an offensive lineman, that's sort of Midwest, beef. All 3 of them sort of have some issues. And so it made it a lot easier to pick the school that he felt like he was comparing everyone to begin with. And so at that point, he didn't feel the need to wait any longer. Now, when you're talking about other players, especially in the class of 2023, that's where you just start to wonder, Ohio State in that class very specifically only has 4 or 5 spots left. So 3 of them at least they're trying to lock in on the defensive line, including the defensive end position, where they have key players like Keon Keeley, Damon Wilson, and Mateo Uiagalelei that they're just sort of waiting for a decision from. None of those guys are going to make decisions on anyone else's timeline, but we should see movement and an answer probably on Keeley and Wilson by the end of this month. So at that rate, at least you'll know heading into the stretch run, the last 7 weeks before signing day, the signing day period that starts on December 21st, that at least you'll know what else you need to accomplish in that class. But as far as the class of 2024, there have been a handful of players that Dylan Raiola has been working on building relationships with and trying to, form this bond with in order to really promote the fact and the idea that Ohio State has a chance to be the best class in the country in 2024. And now you start to have two very key pieces when you have a left tackle and when you have the quarterback, who, again, as you mentioned, the quarterback's not just the number one quarterback in the country, but the number one player in the country, and by a wide margin. It's not one of these situations where you have a couple guys jostling back and forth for that spot. I mean, Dylan Raiola is the clear-cut number one player in the country, and probably would be the number one player in the country if he reclassified to 2023, which he's not. So don't think that I'm hinting at that, but like he's that much better than everyone else. So as far as a prospect goes, but there are a number of players that are in this sort of mid part of their recruitment where it's like they may be leaning and having a decision close to made, but then they still want to experience the process. Some of that's in state when you have cornerbacks like Bryce West and Aaron Scott. Some of that is going to be safeties like Peyton Woodyard out in California. And now the Buckeyes, are having to deal with that at wide receiver. Jeremiah Smith, who's a 5-star wide receiver down in Florida. Ty Sear Denmark, a wide receiver from Philadelphia, who announced earlier this week he's setting up his decision date for November 24th. I think Ohio State's the leader there. So you could see a real push here in the next 6-7 weeks for Ohio State to really kickstart and blow up that class of 2024.
Let's give Ian more his moment here, Berm. Like, you compared him to Thayer Munford for an Ohio State sort of projection. Why is that?
The body type is very similar. The way he moves is very similar. He's athletic, but he's not a kid that's going to be sprinting around the field a lot. I mean, Thayer in his younger years was a little bit more nimble. And so you see that out of Ian. He's a kid that is very adept in pass pro and run blocking in high school, which is not common. They play a pro style offense at New Palestine. Again, their head coach, Kyle Ralph, is a developer of offensive linemen. I think their offensive line goes like 6'5", 290 average or something over there. I mean, it is a big time, like, high school offensive line. They have a player in Luke Burgess, who Ohio State recruited, who's committed to Louisville in the class of 2023, who's 6'8", 310, like on the other side of the other tackle. So he's just a player that is well-rounded and well-coached and ahead of where other players are at his point. But body style, if you look at him, you can see a little bit of Thayer in the longer arms, the upper body that maybe is going to need some development to get that upper body strength, but he understands leverage very well. He moves his feet well, and he can do both pass pro and run blocking, which again is just not something that you see a lot of in high school. The big upside, again, when you're the number one ranked player in the country at your position, it's because people see a lot of things to build around. And that's why Justin Fry, when he camped at Ohio State this summer with the Buckeyes, Ian Moore sort of went from unknown to must get very quickly for the Buckeyes.
The other thing that you mentioned there in terms of upper body development, and sometimes we focus on the recruiting rankings and the projections, like, he's still got a long time to do that.
Yeah.
He's not going to be on campus in January of this year, or January of 2023. And he's, if he's lucky, he could get there in January of 2024, or if that's the plan. Like, we're getting way ahead of that, but he's still got plenty of time to go to more camps and work on the technical stuff next summer with Ohio State. I'm sure that after you make an early commitment and where he lives, that he'll be a fixture on campus in the summer. And that also means that he'll be able to walk around with Mickey Marotti and get some feedback on just how he can jumpstart that process as well. So there's a lot of advantages to this. It's crazy to me a little bit how much the speed timeline has sped up over the years for recruits like this. It's easy for me to remember, and I'm sure much easier for you. Like, you want to be you're the number one player at your position. Take it all the way to signing day. Like, bring on the attention, and that's just not the way a lot of these guys operate now.
Yeah, especially in the offensive line, it's still a group of people that are, generally speaking, less desiring of all the attention that comes with the recruiting process. and then you couple that with being an offensive lineman from the Midwest, it changes it even more. These kids understand that there is value in committing early, and if you know where you want to go, you need to lock that in and make sure that you have that spot taken, and make sure that no one else takes it from you. But as you mentioned, the real benefit, the real probably under discussed benefit of committing this early, and again, it's not that early because he is midway through his junior season, and that seems like a fairly normal time for these kids to make that decision. But the real value is what you said. He can spend the next year and 3 months focusing on getting better with Justin Fry, getting better by learning from Mick Marotti, making sure he's at every Ohio State camp next summer instead of spending his time visiting schools that he may not be fully interested in, or that he's doing just for the fun of it. Talking to Ian, as I've gotten to know him over the last few months, like his real focus was, I don't like doing this. I want to play football, and I want to make a decision to play at a place that feels like home. And when I talked to him on Wednesday night about the decision, and he basically said that he had been spending the last couple weeks trying to think of reasons to not commit yet. And so when that's the case, like there's nothing good that comes from that. It's just a matter of delaying for delaying's sake. And when you are a player, even if you're the number one ranked player in the country, when you want to go to Ohio State, like the Buckeyes have options, so you can't just hold that spot forever. So it shows a little bit of intelligence, a foresight to make sure that he locks in his spot, and now he can really begin on the development process with Justin Fry. The whole relationship, the whole conversation changes so much when a recruit commits versus when they're just being recruited, because coaches get a lot more candid, players get a lot more willing to be vulnerable and open up about what their issues are on the field. And the relationship just takes off to a whole new level. So that's where you start to see the real benefit of that.
Berm, I think everyone would be upset if we had a commitment reaction video and talking about the offensive line and didn't address what's likely to be a pretty important 2023 class and or exploration into the transfer portal. Ohio State is going to lose Paris Johnson, barring something catastrophic happening to him physically. That is going to happen. Dwan Jones is almost certainly going to be going to the NFL. Matthew Jones will be going to the NFL. And I don't think this is going to happen, but it's possible that Luke Whippler could as well. So again, you don't recruit somebody and then expect an offensive lineman to play as a true freshman. So I'm not talking about that from the 2023 perspective, but there's got to be some planning for the future that involves not just getting the number one player for 2024.
No, and that's the beauty of college football nowadays, is that every single game day that Ohio State plays is a chance to scout potential players, because you can essentially just start looking around the league, and you're going to want players to come in that are able to contribute and able to play right away. That's not the case generally at the offensive line. It's not a position where it's easy to plug and play. It's the hardest position in football to evaluate for high school talent, and it is the hardest position in football to get ready to play once you're on campus. So the Buckeyes, while we've talked ad nauseum in the last couple of years about the transfer portal and Ryan Day's approach to it, he's not going to go out there and just grab 7 or 8 transfers and say, hey, now come in and change our program. They're going to be very specific, and it seems likely to me, looking at the class of 2023, when you have commitments from 4 offensive linemen, but outside of Luke Montgomery, I don't know that any one of them are physically capable of really contributing as freshmen. And Luke still is a long ways away from being able to dominate at the Big Ten level, but his size and his athleticism puts him a little bit ahead of Austin Sareveld, a little bit ahead of Josh Padilla. And now they have to figure out, how do you get 1 or 2 guys that fit the culture, that fit the position, that fit the offense and the style of play. And I guarantee you the Buckeyes are looking at that now. To put out names obviously would be folly, because everything can change. But as we look back over the last few years, the only real transfers that Ohio State has really made it a point to go after were players that they knew were going to come in and start right away. And since this has been happening, Jonah Jackson's the only offensive lineman they've brought in. I don't know if there's 3 Jonah Jacksons out there right now, but if there are, I mean, you should probably call Ohio State.
I don't think there are. And I don't look, we've talked about this process before, and that can be a very different show. We don't need to belabor it when we're talking about Ian Moore. Like, there are still very talented guys waiting for that opportunity at Ohio State, and the risk you run if you pursue nothing but transfers is that what signal do you send then to a Josh Fryer who's paid his dues and is going to be very good, or that you Donovan Jackson can play left tackle if need. We don't have to dive into all of that, but this is the 2023 offensive line for Ohio State is going to be fascinating. But they did obviously lay down some preparations for the future with the class of 2024 in the best possible way that they could. And I think Justin Fry will feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I mean, when you go out and you get the number one ranked player in the country at your position, things are good. And now the focus is finding compliments to him. There's Cam Pringle in South Carolina, who's one. There's Georgia Daniel Calhoun, another offensive tackle who's on the board. I know that Pringle is a guy that Raiola has gone to bat to try to get to know a little bit. And then the Buckeyes are really just going to start looking around. There's this kid in Massachusetts named Liam Andrews, who's probably the top of the list for Justin Fry to be the bookend with Ian Moore. And now you have guys to help build that class. And there's nothing more important right now in recruiting than peer-to-peer conversation, even more so than NIL, which obviously is something that Buckeyes are going to have to deal with at every position. But the offensive line, generally speaking, is one where that's less of a concern because kids are much more looking at development and how you get ready to make real money down the road in the NFL. So it's a huge win for Ohio State. It's commitment number 2 in the class of 2024. That's Ian Moore from New Palestine, Indiana, 6'6", 290-pound right tackle right now, but a player who could play either side of the line for the Buckeyes as he gets developed and grows into that position. So we'll talk about him more over at ohiostate.rivals.com. Austin Ward and myself, Jeremy Birmingham, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Hit the subscribe button, hit the little notification button if you're watching us on YouTube. That way you know when there's more content like this coming, because sometimes commitments happen when you least expect it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.